Hello and welcome to episode 0 of the What's Next show. My name's Patrick Dees, and no, not your normal host for this show. That would be my guest today, Brian Finnerty. We're going to talk a little bit about his journey and just all of the life experiences that he brings to this podcast. And I thought it would be helpful as a fan of Brian, as a fan of podcasts in general, as an audience member, I thought it would be helpful to understand everything that he's been through and the unique perspective that he brings to both what's next, to entrepreneurialism, athletics, all of those things. So without further ado, let me introduce your host and my friend, Brian Finnerty. Welcome to episode 0 of the What's Next show, my friend.
Man, what an iconic start. Yeah, here it is. And thank you for saying yes to doing this. Your experience has been great, and your encouragement, and as we covered before, your energy, it's contagious. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, any chance to hang out, admittedly. Folks will quickly gather for episodes. I'm a bit of a Brian fanboy. Excited to hang out and talk a little bit about your journey. So let's start with, for folks listening, we're calling this episode 0, and this is a chance to set the table for who you are, but maybe more importantly, what this show will be, what listeners can expect to get out of it over the next several weeks. I think it's going to be a really interesting series, and I've had a glimpse into some of the guests that you're bringing on. Talk to us about what is the show? What are your goals for it? What can people expect over the coming weeks as they start listening to the What's Next show?
Yeah, I think the main thing is, with the gray hair on the top of my head and the wisdom that's come with that, the hard knocks, is trying to share some insights, some helpful hints and tips to anybody who's been a high performer, right? Maybe an ex-pro athlete, a current pro athlete, a high performer at a company, doing something for somebody else, or being in that bigger team environment, and then making the transition over to maybe doing something for yourself, and maybe avoiding some of those steps, which is, I was doing great over here in this really controlled, I'll use a pro team, given that's my background, environment, where everything from what I eat to where we travel and how we train, and we step into our own, and we go, oh boy, there's no safety net here. And so my hope is to bring guys like you on the show and just highlight, what have you done? Maybe more importantly, what have you done wrong? And where can we help kind of people who want to be on this journey get the experience, not opinion? You and I aren't going to sit here and talk about what we think about. We're going to talk about what we did. And I think that's an important piece, whether that's coaching, mentoring. But my hope is that we can help people along that journey to confirm or deny that this is the right place to go, and then be a support structure around that.
I thought it was really interesting when I asked you a little bit about the show early on. And yeah, as shows find their voice, right? What it starts is not ultimately where it's going to be. But we talked a little bit about what's the North Star? What are the things that are driving it? And you said a couple of things that I think were really interesting. You said, obviously, this is a show for folks who are driven, high achievers. And you said something that I thought was fascinating, which was that it's for people who are humble enough to share their fuck ups. Why do you think that was important? And how does that differentiate this show from a lot of the other shows that are trying to impart pearls of wisdom as it relates to what's next?
Yeah, great question. For me, I think there's a lot of shock jock. I'm dating myself when I say that, but this mentality of, I'm either going to tell you what a piece of shit you are because you didn't do it right, or you haven't been doing it right. Along with, if you don't do this, it's do this or else, right? It's this fear factor that goes into it. And so for me, it was, I would hope to introduce guests and maybe some of my solo episodes that are really just about some humility of sharing. Yeah, we effed it up. And I hope that you don't have to go through that. It is part of the learning, but I'm not here to scare you into something or tell you about only the sexy pieces of being in business for ourselves. And the money and the lifestyle. Those things are great, but there's a lot of work in between. And so to me, it's just that balance between some humility around it and just this willingness to say, yeah, I'd love to help people on that journey.
It's so interesting to me because I think that when you first told me about the show, you'd said that this isn't not to put a name to it, but the Gary V's out there. There's a lot of hustle porn out there that, like, I think to some degree glamorizes this, starting a business, betting on yourself. All of those things are true. But I think it's super healthy to take a look at it and say, it's not for everybody. And to your point, the highs are super high and the lows are going to be equally as low. And you just have to know what you're signing up for before you get into some of this stuff. And I feel like your life, you've lived it and you've come out the other side better for it, for sure. But I think that I'm so excited to start hearing your guests talk a little bit about what worked and ultimately what didn't work.
Totally. And you and I talked about this offline a bit and have talked over a decade plus worth of time. I certainly wouldn't be here without guys who were doing this way before podcasts and podcasts were cool, or before they were called masterminds. It was when I was in my early to mid 40s, guys that were in their 50s saying, hey, let's go grab a beer or a cup of coffee, or let me put you together with 4 other
Yeah.
people who their only benefit is to help you. They're not
Yeah.
consulting for you. There's no end game for them. It was honestly just to help. So for me, I'm doing some mentorship work. I know you are too. And it's really okay. If I can do that one-on-one, that's awesome. But how can I do that one to many?
Yeah.
So we're still getting that kind of tribe and vibe. So that's what I'm looking for.
And to something that actually scales. And that's something that I'm really excited about this show personally, because again, this is just me telling you how awesome you are. What an episode 0. But like this thing that I get to your point, I've known you for a better part of a decade. If I had a couple words to describe you, and I want to get into your journey, but authentic has always been that. You are as real as they come. You're candid. And I think you're always willing to extend a hand, and like having this platform now that scales. To your point, this isn't just a coffee with 1 or 2 folks. It's, hopefully people can take a lot out of this. One of the things that you also said was that you as it relates to a North Star, was that you want the show to be something, and something for someone who want to be something, a part of something that's bigger than they are, right? Like what was the kind of driver there? And then I want to start talking a little bit about like, your start and your journey.
Man, that's a deep question. I don't want to take up all of episode
No,
0
please.
there, but it's really, do you think that either the business is bigger than you, because that means then the people who work in the business, we're all rowing in that direction. And the other is, at the end of the day, we hope to be successful in it. And I'll just take the financial side, but there's the human side as well, is what can we do with what we get? So on the financial side, if I get more, can I give more? That means it's bigger than me. And on the human side, can we develop people so they get to find their superpower and do what they're awesome at to give more? And in this case, it would be their time or their whatever. And we can put those 2 things together, then it is way bigger than me or you or whatever we create. We can sit back and look at our businesses and say, wow, there have been families created. There's been some cases, generational wealth created that will change the trajectory for that family for the next course of history. Like that to me is just amazing.
And so I feel like there is a lot of content about kind of this area to what we were talking about earlier, this glorification of kind of entrepreneurialism, and so many folks that are 21, 22 that are out there that give you their 6 steps to a morning routine, which will change your life and whatnot. And I've now known you through multiple like evolutions of who is Brian Finnerty. I want to start with, if you think this is a good place to start, your life as an athlete, right? Like, again, when I hear you tell these war stories about being in the locker room and being on the pitch, like some incredible stories. Let's talk a little bit about your athletic career, and then how that kind of framed the next evolution of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, for me, and again, everybody's journey is different. I didn't grow up on the wrong side of the track, so to be fair, but at the same time, lower middle income, we had to choose between playing AYSO soccer or no soccer. It wasn't, it wasn't travel.
Yep.
It was like mom and dad said, hey, we got local soccer here. I don't know why we need to go to the next city and play. And to be honest with you, 40 plus years later, I still love that theory. Different episode. But the path for me was, I was an overweight kid. I was in the 95th percentile for being obese. I gravitated to goalkeeper because of the size of my body, not because I loved getting smacked by the softball.
You don't have to move as much.
The bigger you are, the more you stop. Right? So I always felt like I had this chip on my shoulder to be something. Then I grew, lost some weight, was supposed to go to James Madison University, broke my wrist, had to be a walk-on, had to be. I got the opportunity to be a walk-on at San Diego State. I was a 4th string goalkeeper, which is a glorified water boy. I was chasing the game, but I did find that in loving the game and loving what I did, it was just obvious to a coach that even as a 4th string goalie, I'm a guy you want to have around. And pretty soon I became a 3rd stringer. And then when the 1st stringer broke his leg and the 2nd string guy got nervous, literally at halftime of a game, the game that the 1st stringer broke his leg, they're like, Finnerty, unless somebody else puts a goalie jersey on, you're in. And we had a tremendous run that year. So I think that sort of just mental fortitude of stay with it, do what you love, has completely, and then it happened as again a pro, came in as a rookie to an expansion franchise, which you know all about that world of things. Supposed to go to San Diego and play for a storied franchise. I ended up coming to Detroit, 1st-year franchise, and owned by the Ilitch family, learning this hard work, grassroots, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. It's just awesome. And so I really tapped into that going forward, which is keep the fortitude, work hard, surround yourself with people that are like-minded. And again, you need a little luck along the way for sure and to be ready for it. But yeah, that was a bit of the transition.
I just learned that the Detroit was an expansion team. So I want to double click on that piece, because that alone is fascinating. Talk to us a little bit about the game of soccer. Was it simply because that wasn't available, or was that like more exciting to you as a sport than other things as you were growing up? Does anything particularly draw you to that? And then I want to talk a little bit about Detroit.
Yeah, I loved soccer as a fill-in for baseball. I loved baseball. So I was a catcher and third baseman. So you'd say, no kidding, you end up playing goalkeeper.
Yes, your catch.
Stopping the
Yeah.
ball, barking orders.
Yeah.
It fit my personality. But my junior year in high school, I made a grave error at third base with bases loaded. That pretty easily grounded ball that should have just stepped on the bag, and the game. Ball went through my legs. Run scores, we lose the game. After the game, the coach takes me out to center field fence with a bucket full of fungo balls, with the team all basically in a half circle facing me, and just starts rifling balls like, until you catch 3 in a row, we're not going home. And he's ripping them from 15 feet away. And again, I'm a junior in high school. I start bawling. The guys are super uncomfortable. Sure. And I went home, and my dad asked me a very important question. Do you love doing this? And yeah, I'd say, unfortunately for baseball, it was like, at that moment, it was the thing I hated the most. And so I just switched off to baseball, and I thought, you know what? I really do love the people in soccer. And I had a coach, Augusto Alarcon, who was a medical doctor from Mexico City. And he just loved the fact that he was helping me refine my diet, going from this overweight kid to eating better food. And I don't know, I fell in love with the love of the game. Like, it is a great game. But there was a lot of love that was surrounding me as a high school kid, completely lost, but a decent athlete. And yeah, I just gravitated in that direction.
I'm going to come back to love of the game and that passion as it relates to business in a little bit. But I want to double click on that Detroit being an expansion team. That is a startup for somebody who has owned I've owned an arena league team. I was a minority partner at the Las Vegas Outlaws with Vince Neil from Motley Crue. I lived it. We were a first year franchise, and that, in every sense of the word, is a startup, but more complicated it was for me because it was all these things that I didn't know. I walked into that opportunity to think, oh, I got this. It's a startup. I know this, blocking and tackling, if you will, if you excuse the pun, we can figure this out. And it blew my mind. You had a front row seat for what it's like to get not only a team off the ground, but a business. What was that like?
It was fascinating for me fascinating and humbling because you don't know what you don't know. So I came to Detroit thinking I was signing a 1-year contract, and I was going to be heading back to San Diego to get my regular contract. So halfway through the season, starting goalkeeper gets injured, the same situation. Finnerty, you're in, baptism by fire. We have a great run. I end up getting rookie of the year that year. And Tony Gwynn's agent, who I went to San Diego State with his son, said, I asked him if he'd be my agent. And he's like, quite frankly, you don't make enough money in soccer. So I'm just going to give you some advice.
Sure.
Negotiate your first contract for all of these big things. One of them was, if I get rookie of the year, and I won't name the amount of money because it's still embarrassing, but it was a sum larger than a bunch of paychecks.
Sure.
And so I got rookie of the year that year. Of course, we get to the end of the year, expansion franchise. The Illiches were in transition of buying the team. It was owned by a different group the first year. They were buying it. They weren't going to honor anything financial until the next year. So the old ownership group said, if you want your bonus money, stick around, because I was going to go back to San Diego.
Yeah.
Stick around for a few weeks and sell next year's season tickets. And 80% of what you sell, you can keep up to your bonus level. So you want to talk about startup? I was like,
wow,
I feel like that's my money. I have no problem calling season ticket holders I've seen all year.
Yeah.
And hey, do you want to renew for next year? I'm so happy to see you next year. I'll be back. I'm signing a contract. This is going to be great. Yeah. So that's how I made my rookie of the year bonus money. And then my wife and I got married that summer, and we literally got, this will date me again, a fax at the Marriott when we were on our honeymoon in Hawaii, got a fax to the front desk.
Okay.
That was an extension of our contract in Detroit. And they had doubled and I'm putting this in quotes because it included free apartment and some food allowance, doubled our contract. And we were literally dancing like we had won the lottery in the lobby of the Marriott
on
in
the honeymoon.
Hawaii.
Oh, it's magic.
We were going back. So yeah, that was one of the stories of our expansion franchise / startup in Detroit.
I admire anybody who can pick up the phone and call anybody to do anything. It's a skill set in and of itself. So what is that a point where it started to get in your blood? Just in that story, you hear contract negotiation and follow through, and then jumping into the sales piece of it. Was that is that moment where you started thinking like, hey, post athletic career, hey, I like this. There's an excitement to it. Is that what kind of lit that fire for you? Was that experience in Detroit and what came next?
I would say it was like gasoline on a fire for me, because and I'm going to lead into that. But my starting point was really in between my freshman and sophomore year of high school, my dad lost his job. So he was an engineer, is an engineer, and started in the mailroom with this company, a couple of years of junior college, and this was his career. And after 20 plus years, they literally 2-week pink slipped him and said, hey, the new technologies are coming, new high school grads are coming. And my dad was so dependent on that job. I got to see firsthand that if that's your dependence and there's no independence from that, man, it put a lot of strain on the family for the 4 years that, I was there through high school before going to college. So I knew I wanted to control my destiny, but I wasn't quite sure how. I'd seen my mom run her own hair salon and I had a glimpse of it.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, coming out of that experience was like, I can not only do this, and then I was working with some of the people from the Illich organization who I cannot say enough about them, just gritty, hardworking, love the city of Detroit people, like for generations, and obviously still doing great things here. I got to see it firsthand. And I think again, speaking of experience, not opinion, I was shoulder to shoulder with guys like, whether you're the Red Wings, the Tigers, or the Rockers and Steps, we're going to sell like it's going out of style. We're going to treat you guys. We're going to give you the accoutrements of what goes with doing that. And I just got to see it firsthand. So it was awesome.
Yeah, it's so different than reading about it or studying it in theory versus being in the trenches, not seeing it, being that front row seat. That's incredible. I don't know. I'm sure that's paid dividends for your entire life.
Totally.
So you had an 11-year career. You played like 449 games. You were like the Iron Man of the 90s. I think player of the month like 11 times over the course of that time. Like you had a career. And I know during the course of that, no athlete wants to think about when they're not playing the game anymore. To your point, you had this intense love of the game. At what point during that career did you start thinking, look, I'm not going to do this forever. What's next? And then what was that transition out to, hey, what's Brian Finnerty 2.0 look? And walk us through that transition.
Yeah, I'd love to tell you there's a really measured, sexy approach to that. But I played 10 years in Detroit with the goal to play 100, like all athletes do.
Sure.
I will tell the game when I'm ready to leave. And then the Illiches sold the team to the Davidson family, who owned the Pistons. And in that transition year, they wanted to make a move to a fully younger team and a less expensive team. And given any sport, you totally understand it.
Yep.
So I wasn't really like, my emotions weren't hurt, but it was smacking me dead in the face that you may not get to choose how you end your career.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky that New York was in desperate need of a goalkeeper, and Mr. Belante, who owned the Buffalo Sabres at the time, really had a passion for soccer based on his Italian background, and made Denise and I a very handsome offer to go there for a final year. We were just found out that summer Denise was pregnant with twins. So we got our kids coming on the way, and all those things formed, you know what, I think this is going to be the swan song. So the boys are going to be born. Let's have a great last year. I'll go out under my terms. And we also were making plans back here in Detroit to open a sports facility. So it was like, I think everything's just lining up, and the Cards had a great last season in New York. Got to come home, kept our home here, open up our sports facility, High Velocity, in 2001, same year the boys were born. And 23 years later, it's still kicking ass. And it's been a great test ground for many businesses, many technologies, the springboard for a lot of things, for sure.
And then what does this chapter look like? You leave soccer. I'm sure part of you just wanted to be playing that for the rest of forever. So you start getting into this Brian 2.0. Do you have an idea of, to the name of the show, what's next? Do you have a really clear vision of what's that next thing I'm going to go after? Or was it just I know we've got High Velocity. This is something that excites me. Where's your head, and what went into your decision-making process post that chapter? Because I think so many, I think this is where this show is going to be really helpful to a lot of people, because anytime you're thinking about that next thing, that there's time is so finite. And so there's only so many things you can dedicate your time and energy and whatnot to, and you want to make the right decision. And so just what a critical time in life. And I'm curious to see where your head was during that transition.
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's more of just a reflection. So my pause here will be, I had a very clear concept of what High Velocity would be. I'd spent 11 years traveling the globe playing indoor soccer at the time, but I got to see the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
We'd be in a city for a few days sometimes if you're transitioning between Seattle and Calgary, and then Calgary to Edmonton. So we were playing in some of their practice facilities, which were reclaimed ice facilities, some of them, which were deplorable. You wouldn't let your kids walk in the facility, let alone crawl on the ground. And then others you walk into, wow, this is world-class.
Yeah.
This is amazing. So I had mentally pictured what a perfect sports facility would be like. That was great to have that picture. So at least when I was thinking of leaving, I'm like, I know what I want to build. And Frank Tanana, ex-pitcher for the Tigers and the Angels, gave me some great advice as a mentor that when you leave on your terms, the game will call you back and the offers will be crazy. So the temptation will be go get paid to play a game.
Of course.
He basically said, look, get resolved right now that the amount of time that you would have spent going to turn back around and go do that, pour yourself into learning how to do what's next. And man, he was such a futurist, right? Because the phone rang off the hook like it had never happened in my career. And this is 11 years in. I'm banged up. You'd think courtesy contract, but instead it was another doubling offer. And Denise,
I mean, look,
really
you're at two for Brian.
Like,
They know you're incredible in the box, but you're also money on the phone. Are you kidding me? I don't know.
Right. No, so it was good to know that because then I found my worth in being just a good human and a guy who had some discipline, albeit at the time felt small, but discipline to go, no, this is what I committed to. My boys are born. I'm going to go do this. And on the flip side, Denise and I had to leverage our house back in the day when you can actually go over 100%. We took 120% loan on our home. Incredible. And use that to open up high velocity. And Denise said, which again, super impactful. I'm coming to her saying, honey, this doesn't work out, like we're not living in this house.
Yeah, we lose the house.
It doesn't matter. We'll go live in an apartment if we have to, but I know it's going to work. That was like giving me a shot of Uber steroids. I was going to go conquer the world. There was no way I could fail because I had somebody saying, look, no matter what, I believe in you. We can do this. And yeah, it was okay. We took some risk. I knew what it was going to look like. And then I said, okay, now I got to go build a team. And I did have 11 years of being team captain for 9 of them, understanding what it took to work within high performing teams. And yeah, I went out and found the three people that started the business with me, my manager, my CFO, and my director of special events were all with me when we were dust in the dirt in a construction trailer. They're still with us today. So that I think speaks to them as just great owner operators, but more importantly, I understood back then the value team for sure.
You do. I feel like a lot of people talk this talk, and I feel like you are an example. Again, this is the show where I just tell you how awesome you are, but buckle up. Because this is this, I think people talk that talk, but since I've known you, you've talked a lot about surrounding yourself with the right people and getting mentorship, right? You talk about Denise and like her unmitigated belief in the fact that this is going to work. Where did this excitement for mentorship start? Was that like early soccer days, or where did you learn the value of having the right people around you, having mentors and building that team piece?
You're asking me all these questions that are just, it's like pulling the Band-Aid off, right? Which is, so
people got to know the real Brian here.
Yeah. Being raw and truth be told, I'm a great hindsight review accolade guy.
Sure.
I can look back and go, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And not until I did look back, I think this is one of the things I am also learning at 56, being part of Strategic Coach and Dan Sullivan's thinking, which has been amazing, giving him a huge amount of credit just in what I've learned so far. But as entrepreneurs, we don't typically look back. We're always looking forward. Yeah. We get a lot of attaboys for looking forward. Mm-hmm. As I look back, I found people like Augusto Alarcon, my coach at 14 years old, Vince Doviditis, the guy that barely spoke any English, who said, I believe in you as a goalkeeper, regardless of the fact that you're way undersized, way overweight. He saw something in me that kept the fire of soccer, not a kid pinned against an outfield fence, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I get to college and I got to meet 2 pro players that came and volunteered their time as assistant coaches at San Diego State who had no need to do that. Kevin Crow and Victor Noguera. So I look back and I said, man, I've had all these instances of guys just pouring in, not with their hand out of what's in it for me. They were just loving what they did. As I just asked that question to more and more people, I was pleasantly shocked how many people said, sure, I'd love to get a cup of coffee with you. I'd love to meet you and talk about your business plan. But truth of it is, a lot of people ask, but very few follow through with, if they're going to sit down and talk about your business plan next Friday, you better show up next Friday with the business plan. The following Friday, or show up with something sketched out that isn't really. So I think I always valued their time. I'm a big fan of that. I think how you value people's time shows respect. And I think those two things played hand in hand, right? Seeking it and then being respectful of the people who said yes as a gift, for sure.
There was so much more to cover. I feel like I could talk to you forever. So you spent this time growing up in athletics, your time in Detroit and New York. You've understood the value. You probably knew this before, but you've learned the value of creating strong teams. You've now found unbelievable mentors and folks to surround yourself with. What's that next step? So I met you in the mobile phase. You'd started this other business. What was the impetus to get into Protect Sell and that piece of it? And then I want to start talking about how that took us to current when we're talking about opportunity seed. So we'd love to understand, what was that chapter of Brian's life like?
Yeah. So we had just opened High Velocity in '01.
Okay.
2003, I started a consulting business called Sports Facilities Advisory that literally would help people build our type of sports facilities. And
Sure.
that just came out of enough people calling and saying, hey, can I come tour your facility? And sure. And it got so bad that I was literally flying to Kansas City to help a guy build one. And Denise, is he paying you? And I'm like, no, I'm just helping him out. She's like, are you serious? No, but he's paying for my plane ticket and buys our hotel room.
Yeah.
I'm a goalkeeper, so
Yeah.
it takes me a while. We started a firm that I grew and sold my portion of it back to my other two partners in 2008.
Sure.
And had some money burning a hole in my pocket, tongue in cheek there a little bit, but I felt like I had house money. And my good friend, Rob Emery, who you know very well, was in this cell phone stores space and had seen a lot of ups and downs. And the one place, I'm a math guy by nature, and he was selling his own version of insurance and it said, hey, do you mind taking a look at the books? I'm giving you the sped up version. And when I looked at him, I think the math doesn't quite play out. We need to restructure this. And from 2 people in a back office at his cell phone stores to 125 people doing 125 million by 2012, all with the premise, let's serve the customer. Back then, assuring was get a police report. If you can't prove that, you're not getting a phone back. And we just said, look, if your phone was stolen, call us and we'll replace it. As much as everybody thought that was crazy, it resonated with the customers. And so it proved out for me that we had a great team. We assembled another great team.
Yeah.
And when you do what the customer needs, it's just not that hard. I don't mean to oversimplify it. Again, I'm not getting into the sexy part. There was a lot of hard work. But yeah, that was the journey. And again, it was a reaffirmation that if we get the right people working with us, they believe in the mission of what we want to do. And at the end of the day, we're providing a product that people just can't say no to, and they actually love to buy. We're probably doing something good.
It's funny. I really love people getting introspective and thinking back on both, successes and learning opportunities. And that, like, to your point, where it sounds simple, I think it's a talent to be able to say, look, hey, the simple core truth, that truism for what we did was X, Y, Z. And so your point, literally just taking care of the customers. You can't hear that enough. And what a lesson to leave that, again, probably has paid benefits for years.
It's interesting you say that, because I use the term all the time, follow the money, but you can really insert any word you want there for money. It sounds stupid, right? But again, stupid simple. However many businesses I've consulted with, when I start with, let's follow the money, because typically for them, the ones that it resonates the most, we've started up, we've got a proof of concept. This is actually starting to work. We're making money, but we're not keeping money. So we're probably not cash flow positive. I say, all right, let's follow the money. Let's start with what you've got first, and let's go back and see how we got it. 99% of the time, the problem is not in how we generated the money. It's how we accounted for it, not the accounting, but what touch points were along the way, and where did we fracture something with a consumer that we ended up having to throw at a 30% discount, or a buy one, get one, or insert deal here. And so I think that's very true. When you follow the customer, follow the culture, follow the money, when you follow it backwards, it is pretty simple. If you're really true about what's actually happening versus what you want it to happen, you just circle the places that they aren't congruent and you go, oh, okay. If we work on that, we're probably going to make a lot more money, do it a lot easier, and make people happier.
Yeah. And so often people overcomplicate that stuff. I know it gets a little hand wavy, just like, okay, we'll take care of the customers. But to your point, I feel like if you actually follow those things, it translates. Well, so again, we could talk a lot about Protect Sell and the lessons learned there, but this idea that you've now gone from professional sports, you had this Protect Sell, which is this thriving business, you scaled and exited. And now you've gone from surrounding yourself with great people and having great mentors to having been in the trenches, lived it, and looking to mentor other folks to say, look, like I've been through this, and here's some things that would have been valuable to me had I had somebody just to be a sounding board or to talk through. How does that, what's the genesis of Opportunity Seed? And then talk a little bit about the thesis of Opportunity Seed, and what is Brian 3.0 up to and including the What's Next show?
Yeah. Opportunity Seed in general is made up of our foundation. So when we sold ProtectCell, we put a portion of the money away into a foundation that we could never touch again, that was really addressing the pay-to-play sports conundrum. So we want to make sure that kids who may have looked even less fortunate from where I was growing up, but to give you an example, we're in a community that almost 20% of our kids at middle school and elementary school are on the free or assisted lunch program. So you look at that, if 1 out of kids' families cannot afford lunch every day at school, chances are they're not playing organized baseball, hockey, soccer, softball, insert sport, or robotics, or e-gaming, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So we see that as a foundational issue that needs to be addressed, because most of it happens after school. So in order to fulfill that mission of not doing golf outings to repopulate the foundation, Denise came up with the great idea that why don't you go and invest in companies and work with these small to medium-sized companies, and is our shares in investment through either money or time that we consult with them, and we trade that for equity in the company. As it grows and they sell, we'll repopulate the foundation. And right in between the two, so we've got the foundation and the equity side, the investment side, is our consulting side, where we do work with founding companies, founders of companies, and sometimes just larger profit and not-for-profit organizations who just want to restructure operations. And we come in as a hired gun, do that work, and then whatever we make from that deal, we put back in the foundation. So that's the genesis of what we do. And the idea is, okay, in that, we've created a team of people that I've been around, everything from marketing and social and email and operations, that when we go invest in a company or get sought for help, we can bring in these special forces and literally drop them in, create some structure, create some systems, and then extract them back out, because they're very expensive. And all of our founders know that. So they can grow and thrive without having this sort of debt load of a bunch of overly priced, expensive people, which most, I think, post-startup companies get stuck with. Is, I used to make 300, 400, or 500 grand at my other company. I'll come at a small discount. Hey, we're only doing 4 million in revenue. You just can't afford people like that. So we try to help them through that transition. And then, the transition into what's next really is then about, okay, we've been doing that consulting work, the mentorship work. Can this serve as a platform to at least inform others who might say, we're not even at that spot, we need consulting or help or any of that. We just need some enthusiasm, some check-in, some real life stories of people who have lived to tell these stories. Is it worth it? And you go, yeah, that's what you and I are doing. That's what we're going to talk about.
First of all, I can't wait for lots of episodes of the show. I've had a sneak peek at some of the guests you've got coming on, and I can't wait personally. You, as a multi-time founder, I love this game. I love being around other founders, right? Like-minded people. When you talk to founders, and especially with this Opportunity Seed, I'm sure there's a ton of inbounds. What do you look for when you're talking to founders? Like, what do you value in a founder as somebody that you want to partner with and be involved with longer term?
Yeah, there's a lot of criteria. I think I use the analogy, you've got the race, the horse, and then the jockey on the horse. I want somebody who wants to be the jockey on the horse.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of, and I won't even say younger, I've run into guys in their 50s and 60s that are very happy to play with other people's money with no risk of their own. So they're like, I love horse racing, but hell no, I'm not getting on that thing. That kind of tells me something, versus somebody who says, look, I may not have leveraged all my house, but I've raised a bunch of capital. I've put everything I had into this. And if it loses, it's going to hurt me the worst first. I hate to sound like an asshole, but I know that when you go to bed at night as a founder, you're thinking about this in multiple ways. And I've lived that. So it resonates with me.
Yep.
Yeah. So for me, I'm looking for a founder who's not only got the passion, but has some skin in the game, and then really understands and has experience in where they're at. I think that's important. You and I talked offline about fan-controlled sports, and I was blown away by your experience in the gaming world and how I had no idea. I literally had no idea that when you mesh through the eyes of the gaming community, because you had lived it and done it and grown it, it created so much more texture to fan-controlled sports than I had seen on the outside. So that to me it's probably why it resonates with both of us. But to me, it's okay, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Someone who knows that space, they come with experience. They might not come with the big bank account to start, or a Rolodex of people to talk to, or a SEAL Team 6 of experts who have been in every discipline, but they have a pretty good idea and they know where they're at. All right, let's have that conversation. So that's the long answer to, you got to want to be on the horse, man.
No, it's a great answer. And it's interesting. I thought of you this weekend. I had a young guy call me who's actually interested in getting into a startup for the first time. He's weighing options. Post college, it's like, look, I could start this thing. I've got other opportunities, and was asking for kind of first time founder type advice. What kind of advice do you give to, and I would imagine a good chunk of your audience is going to be some people who are like really weighing, is this something that I want to get into, with these high highs and these low lows of being an entrepreneur? What advice do you give to first time founders?
I think you did the right thing, which is you ask them, what are your other options? What do you bring to the table?
Yeah.
Because again, I'm like, hey, if you're willing to, then you're ready to. So
Sure.
the sports analogy is always, if you're good enough, you're old enough. It's not about being a rookie,
Right,
or a freshman. If you're good enough, you're going to play. And so I like to ask the questions of, what are your other options? What are you doing? Where else can you be that you might be happier? And when I don't hear, I'd rather be happier at my law firm, or I wouldn't rather be happier working at insert investment bank, but I'd love to work 12, 15, 18 hours a day on this idea that I have. Okay, that's an awesome start. And are you willing to be scrappy and eat ramen?
Yeah.
Because I think there are a lot of guys who look at their friends who are driving fancy cars on Instagram every day that look great when they're in Greece and
Fake it,
Taos,
make it.
wherever they're at. And you go, look, founder, for the most part, and you and I giggle about this all the time, it's not that. Like, at the end of the day, you'll have a rich life. I'm a very firm believer in living it. But there are a lot of days where you're going to learn to be scrappy. Our golf clothing company, Galway Bay, I just came back from meetings today. We are uber scrappy. Like, we rent meeting space.
Yeah.
We get Jimmy John's for lunch. It's not old cater deal, because we're being scrappy. We want every dime to go back into that business. So I just make sure that if someone wants to get into it, they know a few things going in, just that don't be disillusioned by all the sexiness on social. There is a lot of success, and don't mistake that it comes with hard work.
So for some people, partying in Greece is their perfect world. Me eating a Jimmy John's in a rented space, like, sign me up, man. This is what I'm all about. Yeah, I think it's grit, right? Like, I think it's do they have that grit? And I'm excited when people hear our episode. We talk a lot about passion and the role that plays in startups. But if they have that grit to be able to stick through that time, I think that's so important. We are winding down from a time perspective. I wanted to turn the time over to you a little bit to talk a little bit about what folks should expect from the show, what expect from you. Because look, again, I'll just talk all about you, but so many of these folks have been out there. You've lived it. You've been through this. You're as candid and authentic and humble a guy as possible. What do you want people to expect from the show, to look forward to? And what are some kind of parting words that you can leave with folks who are just starting to tune into the What's Next show and understand you and your journey?
Yeah. My hope is that you really get some takeaways, but I think deeper than that is, and hopefully I'm not getting called out on it, but I welcome it, that I'm learning every single step of this, right? When you and I do a show, I'm learning.
Yeah.
We're going to have some of the guests that you mentioned. I am such in learning mode that I'm hoping that my questions are stuff that everybody would be saying, oh my gosh, I wish I would have asked that question, because I'm genuinely interested in the answer. I don't have this full script of ask this, then ask this. So I think to expect from the show would be some really authentic questions that are curious. They're from my perspective, having been there and done that. But look, I've been there and done that in one guy's skin.
Yeah.
So I haven't done it with 50 different people in 50 different categories. It's been pretty limited. And I just love these different experiences. So I hope that you get that, the authenticity of that. And from our guests, I think they're going to bring, if I've done my homework, questions you wouldn't normally hear if they're on a different podcast, but isn't just about the sexiest, best stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Are you getting really good information from someone who's actually been through the war?
And I think when you and I spoke offline about it, you talked a little bit about like your passion and desire to add value to folks that are thinking about the space or what's next. Part of that, I think, has to be a dialogue with the audience. Brian, how can folks get a hold of you if there's a specific guest they want to see on the show? If they have questions that you want to ask an upcoming guest, where can people get a hold of you to say, hey, here's what I'm thinking, provide feedback on the show, all those things?
Yeah, great question. Opportunityseed.com will be the easiest to remember. We've got all our social links there.
Yep.
You can always hit me up at Brian with a Y at opportunityseed.com. And then you'll be able to follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Insta at What's Next Podcast. And so all those links will be included in the show notes below. And yeah, you can check us out there.
I love it. I bet you're just mean on TikTok, Brian. Guys, thank you so much for listening to episode 0 of the What's Next show. Hopefully that provided a little bit of insight into your host, Brian Finnerty. I'm Patrick Dees. You can find me at P to the D's. Brian, this has been an absolute pleasure. Guys, I know I, for one, can't wait for the show. So thanks so much for having me, Brian.
Oh, thank you, man. This has been a real treat, and I'm super excited to kick it off.
Can't wait. Talk to you soon.